At 52, nobody prepares you for disappearing. Nobody warns you that 2 decades of putting yourself into someone else's life can be reduced to one suitcase on a curb. A younger woman on your porch, a lock changed before the ink dries on the papers. The world looks at a woman like Sarah, cast aside, replaced, left holding almost nothing, and assumes she'll go quiet. Shrink into some corner, become invisible. But here's what they never account for. When you take everything from a woman who spent 23 years giving, you don't hollow her out. You set her loose, free to learn what her own hands can make from nothing. What Sarah built in the forgotten belly of this city didn't merely keep her alive. It proved her real life hadn't started yet. If stories of justice catching up to those who believe they are untouchable speak to something inside you, subscribe and stay until the very end. What your former husband found when he came looking for her 3 months later will leave you speechless. If you hold that those who destroy others eventually face their own reckoning, hit the subscribe button. We tell stories of karmic return here, proof that the universe is patient, but it never forgets. Share this video so it finds someone who needs reminding that being knocked down is not the same as being finished. Because what Sarah constructed in darkness was far beyond survival. It was a blueprint for turning one man's cruelty into her greatest weapon. Sarah Mitchell stood on the pavement outside the home she'd lived in for 23 years, watching a locksmith drill new deadbolts into the front door, once her door, now belonging to someone else entirely. The divorce had been final for 3 days, and despite 2 decades of marriage, despite abandoning her own career so Robert could chase his business dreams, despite all of it, Sarah walked away with almost nothing. Robert's attorneys had been ruthless, expensive, sharp, and inventive in their cruelty. They argued the house was purchased solely in Robert's name before the marriage. They proved his business assets sat buried inside trusts Sarah never knew existed. They documented, meticulously, coldly, how little she had contributed financially over the past 10 years. The settlement gave Sarah $60,000, 30 days to leave. Robert kept the house, worth $2.8 million, the vacation property, the investment accounts, and the quiet pleasure of watching his 52-year-old ex-wife reduced to nothing. Now Sarah stood on that sidewalk, one suitcase, a carrier holding Mina, her black cat, her only companion left in this world. She watched Robert step out of the house, a woman half his age hanging from his arm. Quote _0__. Robert asked the locksmith. Robert took them, with a grin that spread slow across his face. Then his eyes found Sarah, still standing there. The grin widened. Sarah said nothing, her spine straight despite the humiliation, one hand resting on Mina's carrier. "Oh, right," Robert went on, his voice pitched loud enough for the neighbors to catch every word. "You don't have anywhere to go. No job, no savings, no friends who aren't exhausted from listening to you. What was it your attorney said?" He leaned into it. "Unemployable at her age, with no recent work history. That was it, wasn't it?" Across the street, Mrs. Chen stood, watching openly now. Heat climbed Sarah's neck. Robert offered. He laughed, short, dismissive. His companion giggled. Sarah knew her. Amber, one of Robert's junior associates, 28 years old, blissfully ignorant that Robert would toss her aside the moment someone younger caught his eye. "Robert," Sarah said quietly, the first word she'd spoken. Robert replied, dripping with manufactured sympathy. Sarah said. Robert's face went cold. "Do not issue threats. Do not contact me. Do not attempt to challenge this. My legal counsel will dismantle any endeavor you undertake, and the only outcome will be the squandering of your meager funds. Now remove yourself from my property before I summon the authorities for trespassing." Sarah picked up her suitcase in one hand, Mina's carrier in the other. She walked down the sidewalk with her chin raised, past the neighbors pretending not to stare, past the wreckage of everything she'd built. Toward what exactly? She had $60,000 in a bank account, a suitcase of clothes, a cat, and nowhere to live in a city where a studio apartment devoured $3,000 a month. The math was brutal. Her settlement would stretch 18 months if she pinched every penny until it bled. And after that? 52 years old, no recent work history, no references Robert hadn't poisoned, no friends beyond the society women who'd vanished the instant divorce papers were filed. Sarah walked for hours. The suitcase grew heavier with every block. Earlier that week, she'd called people she thought were friends. Every one of them was busy. She'd reached out to former colleagues from before she'd left her career to prop up Roberts. They'd moved on, didn't remember her. Weren't hiring. By evening she found herself in a part of the city she rarely visited, the old financial district, where 1920s stone facades stood shoulder to shoulder with glass towers. The sidewalks had emptied after business hours. She lowered herself onto a bench, bone-tired, and unzipped Mina's carrier to let her breathe. Mina purred, pressed her head into Sarah's palm. The only living thing on earth offering love without conditions. Sarah whispered. As the sun dropped below the roofline, something caught her eye. A metallic grate set into the sidewalk near the old Merchants and Trust Bank. Rusted, half swallowed by weeds, almost invisible. But there were words etched into it, faded, barely legible. Metropolitan Transit Authority Service Entrance. Authorized personnel only. 1932. Sarah remembered reading about the city's abandoned subway stations. Dozens of them sealed since the 1940s when the transit system was modernized. Entire platforms still sitting beneath the streets, forgotten, locked away. This grate looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But the padlock, she leaned closer. The padlock had corroded so thoroughly it was barely holding together. She looked around. Empty street, fading light. And Sarah made a decision that only desperation could produce. She would try the grate, just to see what lay below, just to find out if there was shelter enough for one night while she figured out her next move. The padlock snapped with almost no resistance. The grate was heavy, but she muscled it open far enough to look down. Concrete steps falling away into pure darkness. Cool air rising from below, carrying the smell of earth and ancient metal. Sarah looked at Mina. A soft meow. Sarah pulled a compact flashlight from her purse, a habit from her practical upbringing that Robert had always mocked. She gathered the suitcase, the carrier, and she began descending into the unknown. The stairs went down roughly 20 feet. Sarah counted 32 steps. The flashlight barely cut through the blackness, but what it found made Sarah hold her breath. Concrete walls lined with white tiles, cracked, filthy, but still holding, still whole. At the bottom of the stairs, a corridor stretched before her. Arched ceiling, maybe 8 feet overhead, tiled in the same white. Concrete floor beneath a carpet of dust, dry to the touch. And ahead, the corridor widened into something larger. Sarah moved slowly, every step deliberate, every step tested before she trusted it. The air was cool, but not cruel, dry despite being buried beneath the earth. And the silence, that was what stopped her. Not quiet, silence, the kind that swallows sound whole. Nothing existed down here except Sarah's footsteps and the soft, uncertain sounds Mina made from inside her carrier. The wider space revealed itself gradually under the flashlight's sweep, and what Sarah saw made her stand completely still. A subway platform, 1930s, perfectly preserved, as though someone had simply locked the door and walked away 80 years ago. The platform ran roughly 200 feet long, 20 feet across. White tile covered everything, walls, ceiling, the thick supporting columns. Brass light fixtures hung overhead, their bulbs dead for decades, but the metalwork still elegant, still proud. Advertising posters from the 1940s clung to the walls, hawking products that no longer existed from companies long since dissolved. At the far end, Sarah's beam found the dark mouth of a tunnel where trains once thundered through. To her right, a small room. A door marked Station Manager. Sarah lowered her suitcase and the carrier to the platform floor, unlatched Mina's door, and let the cat step out into this impossible place. Then she looked. Really looked. Dust coated every surface, decades thick. But underneath that dust, the structure held. No water stains bleeding down the walls. No cracks splitting the foundation. Tiles had chipped and broken in spots, but stayed fastened where they belonged. And beneath her feet, faint but unmistakable, the low rumble of modern trains passing through adjacent tunnels. The living city breathed just beyond these walls. But this station had been severed from it. Sealed and abandoned when transit lines were redrawn sometime in the 1940s or 50s. A ghost station, erased from every map. Sarah walked the full length of the platform. At the far end, another doorway. Utility rooms beyond it. One held ancient machinery, rusted into stillness. But the next room, empty. 12 feet by 12 feet, white-tiled walls. A single brass fixture on the ceiling. Dry. Clean, relatively speaking. Private. The door closed behind her. Sarah stood in the center and listened. Nothing. Only the rhythm of her own breathing filling the small tiled space. Something shifted inside her chest. Something loosened. For the first time in months, maybe years, a strange calm settled over her. This place was hers. No one knew it existed. No one could take it from her. Robert's voice couldn't reach her here. His lawyers couldn't touch this. Down here, none of it mattered. Sarah went back to the platform, collected her suitcase and Mina's carrier, and brought everything into that small, empty room. She unzipped the suitcase, pulled out clothing, layered it across the concrete floor. A bed made of sweaters and old blouses. It wasn't comfort, but it was no worse than the cheap hotel she'd considered and couldn't actually afford. Mina padded across the space, nose working every corner, every seam in the tile. Then she circled twice on Sarah's makeshift bedding and settled down, purring. Quote, _22, __. Sarah whispered, then laughed. A real laugh, the kind that surprises you. The absurdity of it. Living in a forgotten subway corridor, talking to her cat, and feeling more peace than she'd known in that sprawling mansion with its marble floors and hollow rooms. That night, Sarah slept deeply. The darkness was total, the silence complete. When she woke, flashlight nearly dead, its beam thin and amber, she made a choice. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because up there, she was Sarah Mitchell. The woman people pitied, the discarded wife who lost everything. But down here, in this forgotten place beneath the city's feet, she was just Sarah, and she was free. She woke to absolute darkness. Panic hit first, sharp, electric, before memory caught up. The flashlight was dead. How long had she been asleep? Hours, certainly, maybe longer. Underground, time had no markers, no light to measure it by. She fumbled for her phone. 6:47 in the morning. 10 hours of sleep. The deepest, most unbroken rest she'd had in months. Mina lay curled against her side, warm and rumbling with quiet satisfaction. Sarah ran her fingers through the cat's fur and let her mind catch up with her circumstances. She was living inside an abandoned subway station. Absurd. And yet, undeniably practical. She had shelter, real shelter, a roof overhead, walls on every side, a door she could lock from within. The space was dry, structurally solid. She owed no one a cent in rent, and not a single soul knew she was here. The disadvantages were obvious. No electricity, no plumbing, no bathroom, no heat beyond whatever warmth the earth itself offered, and the constant, gnawing possibility of being found. But Sarah had $60,000 in her possession and no realistic path to steady work. $3,000 a month on rent would bleed her dry in 20 months. Down here, spending only on food and bare essentials, that money could stretch for years. Enough time to think, enough time to build something real, enough time, maybe, to start over. She made her decision. She would stay, for now, until something better revealed itself. That first full day she spent building routines, laying groundwork. First priority, the way out. The grate above could be lifted from below with a simple lever mechanism. She climbed out in the pale early hours while the streets sat empty, eased the grate back into place, and walked the neighborhood. 3 blocks away, she found a 24-hour diner with a bathroom. She bought coffee and used their facilities to wash up. 2 blocks in another direction, a laundromat. 4 blocks further, a public library with restrooms and electrical outlets. A small grocery store that stayed open late. Everything she needed, all within easy reach of her underground door. Sarah bought supplies, battery-powered LED lanterns, rechargeable batteries, a portable phone charger, bottled water, canned and dried food, cleaning products, cat food, litter, a compact camping stove. $200 gone on that first day, $3,000 saved. Over the week that followed, Sarah carved out a rhythm, up early, above ground before the neighborhood stirred, the diner bathroom, days spent at the library or wandering the city, then back underground each evening, slipping in when darkness made her invisible. She began cleaning her small room. The dust surrendered easily, decades of grime that needed nothing more than a broom and a damp cloth. Beneath all that filth, the tiles gleamed white, even bearing an Art Deco pattern that must have looked elegant when the station first opened. In one of the utility rooms, she found old newspapers. Pages from the 1940s and 50s, yellowed but still readable. She spread them as drop cloths while she scrubbed, then read them by lantern light in the evenings. They pulled her in, small windows into the city's past, into the lives of people who had once walked this platform on their way to work or home. Mina took to the underground like she'd been born for it. The station offered endless corners to investigate, and within days, the cat had claimed her territory. She hunted the occasional mouse that wandered in from the tunnels, keeping the space clear of pests. She seemed perfectly, completely at ease in their strange new world. By the end of the second week, Sarah's room had become something close to comfortable. She'd found a discarded mattress behind a furniture store, far from perfect, but decent enough after a deep cleaning. Blankets, a pillow, a small rug from a second-hand shop. The space was shifting. Less survival shelter, more home. An odd subterranean sanctuary, but hers, entirely hers. Sarah also began venturing deeper into the rest of the station. The platform itself was remarkable. 200 feet of flawless 1930s craftsmanship stretched before her. Gleaming white tiles, opulent brass fixtures, vintage advertisements frozen in time like portraits no one had bothered to take down. A concealed museum, sealed away from the world above. Inside the manager's office, she found the old station maps, dusty but intact. This had been the merchant station, once serving the financial district. Decommissioned in 1952 when the city realigned its transit lines to bypass this sector entirely. The tunnels reached in both directions from the platform. Sarah explored carefully, never straying so far that she lost sight of the platform behind her. But she could tell, the tunnels were structurally sound. They connected to other disused stations. An entire forgotten realm beneath the city. 3 weeks after she'd begun living underground, Sarah sat on the platform one evening. Mina curled warm in her lap, and something extraordinary settled over her. She was content. Not in spite of living in a subway station, because of it. She had found time here, time to reflect, time to read, time to simply exist without judgment pressing down on her shoulders. She had space to grieve the dissolution of her marriage. to release the life that had been stripped from her. Down here, she was not a failure, she was a survivor, and her journey, it was only beginning. 1 month into her subterranean existence, the first real challenge arrived. Water. She had been buying bottled water, but the cost added up and the waste piled higher each week. She needed something sustainable. So, Sarah began studying her surroundings with the methodical eye of an engineer. The tunnel stayed consistently cool and humid. Water droplets formed along the pipes running across the ceiling. Old steam pipes from the building above, long disconnected but still conducting moisture from the ground overhead. Every morning, condensation gathered on those pipes and dripped onto the platform. Sarah had an idea. She positioned clean receptacles beneath the drip points. Over 24 hours, she collected nearly 2 gallons. It needed filtration. She refused to risk contaminated water, but the volume was promising. She bought a portable camping filter, the kind designed to strip out bacteria and particulate matter. Then she built a system. Collect the condensation. Pass it through progressively finer sieves to catch sediment. Run it through the portable filter for guaranteed safety. The result? Clean drinkable water at no recurring cost. For hygiene, she rigged a separate arrangement. A camping shower bag warmed over her portable stove. Not luxurious, but it worked. Her hands made it work. The next obstacle was light. Battery-powered lanterns ate through replacements fast, and the expense gnawed at her limited funds. Sarah needed something that would last. She started spending her days at the public library, buried in books about alternative energy sources and electrical systems. Solar panels, battery arrays, LED efficiency. She absorbed it all. Then she built her plan. During the day, Sarah would arrive at the library carrying several power banks and rechargeable batteries. She plugged them into the available outlets while she read or worked at the public computers. The library staff never raised an eyebrow. People charged their phones there constantly. Come evening, she descended underground with fully charged batteries. These fed LED strip lights she had mounted along the walls and ceiling of her room, stretching across sections of the platform. LEDs are remarkably efficient. A single power bank could keep her living space lit for days. She created a rotation system. 8 power banks cycling between the library and the tunnel. 2 carried up each day for recharging. 6 always ready and operational below. No ongoing cost beyond the initial investment in equipment. Next, food preservation. The tunnel held a naturally cool temperature, roughly 60 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. But she needed actual refrigeration for perishable items. A compact refrigerator was beyond her budget. And even if she could afford one, she had no way to power it. Instead, Sarah engineered an evaporative cooling system from her own research. A box wrapped in wet fabric, positioned where air moved freely. As moisture left the cloth, temperatures inside dropped several degrees. Not a refrigerator, but enough to keep food fresh far longer than it should have lasted. Every rough invention she built with her own hands reassembled something Robert had spent years tearing apart: her belief in herself. She started noticing patterns in what the city threw away. Bakeries dumped bread that was 1 day old. Grocery stores tossed produce with a single bruise. Coffee shops discarded pastries the moment they locked their doors. None of it was garbage. It was perfectly good food the world had decided wasn't worth keeping. Sarah swallowed her pride and began collecting it. She waited until shops went dark, then retrieved what others couldn't be bothered to save. The first few times, shame burned in her chest. But that feeling faded quickly. What replaced it was clarity. This wasn't desperation, it was intelligence. She was feeding herself while the city wasted thousands of pounds of food every night. 6 weeks underground, and Sarah had accomplished something extraordinary. Her monthly expenses had shrunk to less than $500, everything included. Her settlement money, which should have vanished in 20 months, now stretched across a decade if she needed it to. But the money wasn't the real victory. The real victory lived in her hands, in what she now knew about herself. She was resourceful beyond anything she'd imagined. All those years running Robert's household, managing his calendar, orchestrating dinners, events, logistics. She hadn't been serving him, she'd been training herself. Problem solving, engineering, creative thinking, building systems that worked. Robert had told her she was unemployable, told her she lacked practical skills. He was wrong about everything. Sarah possessed extraordinary life skills. She had simply never been given the space to use them for herself. Now, surrounded by the systems she'd designed, the solutions she'd invented, the home she'd carved from nothing, she felt something she couldn't remember ever feeling before. Not just survival, flourishing. And her underground world was about to become something even more remarkable. 2 months after descending into that forgotten passageway, Sarah had transformed her abandoned subway station into a space so beautiful it could have graced the pages of a design magazine. It started with the tiles. She restored them in sections, patient, methodical. Decades of filth came away layer by layer, and beneath it, beauty that stole her breath. Delicate white subway tiles bearing Art Deco patterns in emerald green and gold. The original architects had built something magnificent down here, meant to brighten the commutes of thousands. Their vision had been buried under years of neglect. Sarah was resurrecting it. Hours each day on her knees, cleaning solution and old toothbrushes. Her joints ached, her fingers cramped. But she continued. The word became meditation. Each tile revealed was proof. Beauty exists beneath what the world abandons. You just have to look closer. The central platform became her living room. She carried furniture down piece by piece. Items found on sidewalks, marked free, left curbside on trash nights. The wealthy city discarded treasures constantly, and Sarah had developed an eye for quality hidden beneath surface neglect. A mid-century modern sofa, leather-worn soft but still elegant, needing only a good cleaning. An Art Deco side table that matched the station's bones perfectly. An oriental rug with gently faded colors that still glowed gorgeous in lamplight. A brass floor lamp requiring new wiring, but otherwise flawless. She discovered stacks of books outside a bookstore that was closing forever. Classics, art books, novels. She arranged them on shelves she'd built herself from salvaged timber, creating a library along one wall of the platform. Her found art, paintings and prints abandoned during moves, left behind in renovations. None of it belonged in a museum, but each piece carried something, a quiet beauty that deserved to be seen. She hung them along the walls, and the tunnel became a gallery no one had asked for. The transformation was staggering. That dark, forgotten platform now breathed like a loft apartment. 1930s elegance threaded through with the warmth of salvaged things given second lives. White and green tiles gleamed. Brass fixtures. Sarah had polished by hand, knuckle by knuckle, hour by hour, caught the soft glow of LED light and threw it back in amber. Furniture carved out conversation corners and reading nooks where silence felt welcome, not heavy. Her adjoining room became a bedroom. A found mattress dressed in thrift store linens, a bookshelf, a small desk, a mirror she'd pulled from someone's trash and reframed with her own hands. The old station manager's office she claimed as her study, a place for reading, for thinking, for making plans she'd never been allowed to make. A desk, a chair, a filing cabinet. Curtains hung across the doorway. Not much, but hers. The disused utility room she organized into storage. Shelves lined with containers, food and supplies, arranged with the precision of someone who understood what it meant to have nothing and waste even less. 3 months underground. And Sarah's home was beautiful. Eccentric, yes. Unconventional, absolutely. But genuinely beautiful in a way her former mansion never managed. Because that house had been Robert's vision, Robert's taste, Robert's rules dressed up as shared decisions. This space answered to no one but her. Every object chosen by her hand, every detail shaped by her imagination, unburdened. She started photographing everything with her phone, not to show anyone, not for approval, just to mark the distance between where she'd been and where she stood now. When she scrolled through those images, she couldn't connect them to the dusty, dead platform she'd crawled into months before. And she began writing again. A thing she'd abandoned during the marriage. Quietly. The way you abandon parts of yourself when someone convinces you those parts don't matter. Now, with time stretching in every direction and solitude that no longer frightened her, she kept a journal. Her experiences. The slow alchemy of making beauty from neglect. The shock of discovering what her own hands could do when no one stood over them telling her she was doing it wrong. One evening, Sarah sat on her salvaged sofa. Mina curled warm beside her. The lamp cast its soft glow across the underground sanctuary, a book open in her lap. Peace, real peace, settling into her bones. Then a sound froze her solid. A creak, not from above, from below. From inside the tunnel. Sarah killed the lights. Darkness. Total, absolute. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She held her breath. Mina went still, sensing it too. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. 3 months undetected. 3 months of invisible life built stone by stone. Was it over? A light appeared in the tunnel. A flashlight beam cutting across the platform. Sarah pressed herself behind the sofa, silent, motionless. The beam lingered on her living area, swept across furniture, books, the unmistakable evidence of someone living here. Then a voice, male, stunned. The light moved closer, a silhouette sharpened, a man in a utility uniform. Transit Authority badge on his chest. Found. Sarah stood slowly, hands raised. Open, non-threatening. Quote 24 quote, she said. Quote 25 quote. The worker, young, maybe 30, stared at her, then at the space, then back at her. His face wasn't angry, it was astonished. You're living here, in the old merchant station? He asked. Yes. No point lying. The evidence surrounded them both. I'm so sorry. I know I'm trespassing. I fell. I'll leave. Just, please, don't call the police. He lowered his flashlight so it stopped blinding her. How long have you been here? 3 months. 3 months. He said it again, slower this time. His eyes moved across the furnished platform, the polished tiles. The care pressed into every corner of this place. I don't even know what to say. This is incredible. Sarah blinked. You're not going to arrest me? I'm not a cop. I'm just a maintenance worker. I check the old tunnels for structural problems. Quote 35 __. Nobody's been down here in any official capacity for decades. We run safety inspections every few years. Make sure the abandoned stations aren't going to cave into the active lines. And are they going to cave in? Not this one. The structure's solid. He ran his hand along one of the cleaned tile walls. You did all this yourself? The cleaning, the furniture? Sarah nodded. The worker, his name tag read Miguel, shook his head slowly. 8 years I've been doing this job. I've walked through every abandoned station in the system. Most of them are garbage pits. Dangerous, flooded. But this, he swept his arm across the space. This is like somebody built an underground loft. It's genuinely beautiful. Thank you. Why are you living down here? Are you in some kind of trouble? Running from somebody? I should report this. Technically, you're trespassing on Transit Authority property. I know, Sarah said. I understand. I'll have everything packed by tomorrow. But, technically, my job is to report safety hazards. And you are clearly not a safety hazard. If anything, you've improved the property. A small smile crossed his face. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm filing a report that says Merchant Station is structurally sound and requires no immediate action, and I'm going to forget I ever saw you." Tears pressed against Sarah's eyes. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because my father divorced my mother after 30 years together, left her with nothing. She fought for years before she found her footing again." "I know exactly what that looks like." He pulled a card from his pocket and placed it in her hand. "My number. If you ever have a structural problem, or if anyone else from transit shows up, call me." "I'll do what I can. Thank you, Miguel. You have no idea what this means to me. Good luck, and I mean it. This space is remarkable. You've got real talent." After he left, Sarah sat alone in the quiet for a long time, processing. She had steeled herself to lose everything again, and instead, she'd found someone willing to look the other way. The next morning, still buoyed by the close call and Miguel's unexpected grace, Sarah turned her attention to something she'd been putting off. A water leak in the far utility room. Moisture seeped through a crack in the wall. Not enough to flood anything, but enough to keep the air damp and heavy. She'd meant to seal it weeks ago. Never had the right materials. She knelt close and studied the wall. The leak was coming from behind the metal panel. The panel looked like it had been installed sometime in the 1940s or 50s. Decades newer than the station's original 1930s construction. Sarah gathered tools from her salvage collection. A screwdriver, a pry bar, a hammer. She worked the edges, fighting for leverage. Rust had welded the panel in place. It resisted. Then, it gave. Behind the panel, a hollow space inside the wall. And inside that space, a metal door. A vault door. Roughly 3 feet square, fitted with a combination lock. Sarah's pulse climbed. She pried away more paneling, uncovering the vault's full outline. It sat deep in the wall. Clearly installed when the bank above, the Merchants and Trust Bank, was still operating before it closed in the 1970s. A bank vault, and judging by its position, by the panel someone had placed over it, a vault the world had forgotten. Sarah gripped the handle and turned. Locked, of course. The combination dial was old, mechanical. She had no way to open it. She sat back on her heels, stared at the steel face of that door. Her mind churned. What was behind it? Old paperwork? Currency? Perhaps nothing at all. For 2 weeks, Sarah threw herself into research. Every day at the library, bent over records and histories of the Merchants and Trust Bank. She learned it had been a mid-sized financial institution, one that collapsed in 1973 when the banking crisis swept through like a flood. Its assets were liquidated, its records supposedly transferred to the acquiring bank. But what if some of those records slipped through the cracks? What if this vault held files that had been sealed, forgotten, and swallowed by time? Sarah researched vault cracking too. For an amateur, it was nearly impossible. These old mechanical locks were sophisticated pieces of engineering. But she also discovered something else. Older vaults could sometimes yield their secrets if you knew the default factory combinations common to that era. She found a compiled list of standard combinations used by major vault manufacturers in the 1930s and 50s. Hundreds of entries on that list. But Sarah had something most people didn't. She had time. Every evening, she sat before that vault door, methodically working through combinations, recording each failed attempt, moving to the next. On her 63rd try, the lock gave way with a satisfying click. Inside, metal file boxes, neatly stacked, row after row. Sarah pulled the first one free and lifted the lid. Financial records, ledgers, papers yellowed with age, all dating back to the 1970s. All bearing the name of the Merchants and Trust Bank. As she read, the weight of what she'd found settled over her like a stone. Evidence of extensive financial fraud, tax evasion schemes, records of offshore accounts, lists of wealthy clients who had used the bank to hide money from the authorities. Her hands began to tremble as she reached for more boxes, dozens of them, years of documentation detailing illicit financial activity, and on one client list, highlighted in a bank manager's notes as high priority requiring maintained discretion, was a name Sarah recognized instantly: Robert Mitchell, her ex-husband. 3 days she spent inside that vault, meticulously, page by page, box by box, and with each document she read,
her initial shock hardened into something colder, something sharper, a calculated fury. Robert's wealth hadn't come solely from legitimate business. He had been funneling money offshore since the early 2000s, a practice that began long before their divorce. That continued throughout their entire marriage. Millions routed through the Merchants and Trust Bank and other institutions into accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Luxembourg. The record showed transactions totaling over $15 million moved offshore between 2002 and 2012. None of it declared to tax authorities. Not a cent. Robert had committed massive tax fraud. And during their divorce proceedings, he had claimed limited assets, forced Sarah to accept a pittance of a settlement, while sitting on $15 million in hidden wealth. Sarah photographed every document, thousands of pages. She organized them logically, created digital copies,
stored them across multiple secure cloud accounts. Then she began her research. She needed to understand precisely how to use what she had found. Weeks at the library, tax fraud, divorce fraud, criminal financial reporting. She combed through publicly accessible legal databases, learned the procedures for reporting financial crimes anonymously. She reached out to an attorney, not in person, through an encrypted email service. She presented her situation as hypothetical. What would happen, she asked, if evidence of tax fraud committed by an ex-spouse were discovered, particularly concerning a divorce settlement built on lies? The lawyer's response left no room for ambiguity. Divorce settlements based on fraudulent financial disclosures could be reopened. Concealed assets could be seized, with a portion potentially awarded to the defrauded spouse. And the person who committed the fraud? Criminal prosecution. Sarah had everything she needed, every document, every legal pathway, every piece of the puzzle. But she didn't rush. She waited, patient, deliberate. 4 months after opening that vault, Sarah sent her first anonymous package, addressed to the Fraud Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. Inside, copies of Robert's offshore account records, bank documents detailing transfers, a precise timeline of his financial movements. A note came with the package. It read, Robert Mitchell has evaded roughly $4.2 million in federal taxes over 10 years. Evidence enclosed. A concerned citizen. 7 days later, a second package arrived at the state tax authority. Similar documentation, different agency. 1 week after that, a third package landed on her divorce attorney's desk. The note was precise. You represented me in Mitchell versus Mitchell. Your client, me, was defrauded. Robert Mitchell concealed $15 million in offshore accounts during our marriage and divorce. Evidence enclosed. My settlement was built on fraudulent financial disclosure. Please file to reopen immediately. And then came the final delivery. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District, the branch tasked with prosecuting financial crimes. This package held everything. The full architecture of Robert's fraud, laid out with meticulous precision, document by document. Then Sarah did something she had learned to do well. She waited. 6 weeks passed in silence, but when the silence broke, it shattered like glass. Sarah discovered what had happened the way most people discover news, by accident. She was at the library, sitting at a public computer, when a headline stopped her cold. Local businessman arrested in major tax fraud case. The article spelled it out. Federal charges against Robert Mitchell, tax evasion, fraud, financial crimes stretching back more than a decade. Federal agents had raided his offices, raided his home, his bank accounts, frozen. He faced up to 20 years in prison, millions in fines, millions in back taxes. The article quoted Robert's attorney, Mr. Mitchell maintains his innocence and believes this is a case of mistaken identity or falsified documents. Sarah smiled. Those documents were not falsified. They were authenticated, dated, bank records that could not be argued away. 2 days later, her divorce attorney called. He'd had her number for months, but hadn't been able to reach her. Sarah, where have you been? His voice was urgent. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I've been around, she said, calm, unbothered. What's going on? I filed to reopen your divorce case based on fraudulent financial disclosure. The evidence you sent, Sarah, it's extraordinary. Where did you get it? I'd rather not say. Honestly, it doesn't matter. The attorney pressed on. What matters is this. We have documented proof Robert concealed $15 million during your marriage and divorce. The settlement you accepted was based on lies. We are going to tear that settlement apart and get you what you're owed. Conservatively, that's half the marital assets, including the hidden money. We're talking 7 to 8 million, Sarah. And because he committed fraud, we're pursuing additional damages on top of that. You could walk away with 10 million. The room tilted. $10 million. Probably more, the attorney added. His legitimate business holdings are exposed now, too. The house, the investments, everything. He tried to cheat you. Now he pays for it. Over the next 3 months, Sarah watched Robert's empire come apart at the seams. The federal investigation deepened. The IRS seized his offshore accounts. The divorce case reopened. Robert's fraudulent disclosures were laid bare before the court. He fought it. His expensive attorneys argued, filed motions, stalled. But bank records do not bend. They do not negotiate. The original settlement was annulled. New proceedings began. And this time, Sarah held every card. She negotiated through her attorney, never showed her face. She was owed half of all marital assets, including every dollar he had hidden offshore. She was owed the house. She was owed compensation for years of deliberate deception. The final settlement granted Sarah $8.2 million in cash and assets, plus the house valued at $2.8 million. Robert's remaining net worth shrank to roughly $3 million, most of which would vanish into legal fees, fines, and tax penalties. He had tried to erase her through cruelty and lies. Now he was the one being erased. And Sarah, living in her underground palace, reading about his collapse in the newspaper, felt something settle deep inside her chest. Justice. Real and heavy and earned. A feeling she hadn't known in years. 6 months after sending that first package, Sarah stood outside the Merchants and Trust Bank building, now sleek luxury condominiums, and dialed a number. Mr. Torres, this is Sarah Mitchell. I'm calling about the property we discussed. Miss Mitchell, yes, good news. The City Council approved your proposal. You can purchase the merchant station for the amount we agreed upon. Excellent. My attorney will wire the funds today. This is incredible. The bones are perfect. With the right permits and structural reinforcements, this could be extraordinary. The tunnel. How I found home in the last place anyone would look. Your story gave me hope. You are not finished. You are just beginning. She told them to find their tunnel, build their palace, and remember, the people who throw you away often carry secrets of their own. Be patient, be sharp, and when the moment comes, be fierce about taking back what is yours. 3 years after her divorce, Sarah stood on the platform of the Merchants Cultural Center during a live performance. A string quartet played Beethoven inside that restored, tile-lined space. A place once swallowed by neglect, now breathing with music. Mina, older, slower, but still right there, sat beside her. Hundreds of people filled the platform, people who had stumbled upon this hidden world beneath the city. Sarah watched them, and her mind drifted to Robert. Right then, he was serving his second year of a 7-year sentence for tax evasion. He had been so certain he'd destroyed her, left her with nothing, left her begging. Instead, she had found the forgotten kingdom underground and filled it with beauty. She had pulled his secrets into the light and used them to rebuild everything he stole. She had taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into something extraordinary. She had been thrown away, but down there in the dark where she landed, she found exactly what she needed to rise. If Sarah's story stirred something in you, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every week, we share stories of people who turned their hardest chapters into their greatest victories. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been betrayed, cast aside? Have you found a hidden well of strength in your darkest stretch? Tell your story. Someone scrolling through these words right now might need exactly what you have to say. Sarah teaches something that settles deep in the bones. Rock bottom is not an ending, it is a foundation. When she first climbed down into that abandoned tunnel, carrying nothing but a cat and a single suitcase, she was not falling, she was finding solid ground. Sometimes losing everything means shedding everything that held you back. She shows that creativity is survival itself. Sarah did not just endure her underground life. She thrived by solving every problem with her own mind and her own hands. Water collection rigged from salvage. Lighting carved from ingenuity. Furniture pulled from wreckage and made whole again. Spaces reimagined from ruin into warmth. She proved that a sharp mind and stubborn hands are worth more than any fortune. Most critically, Sarah teaches something about justice and patience, how deeply the two are intertwined. She could have exposed Robert the moment she knew. She didn't. She waited. She documented every detail with surgical precision. She chose the exact moment to reveal what she'd gathered, and when she finally moved, it was with an accuracy that dismantled him completely, while securing her own future with the same stroke. For anyone who has endured betrayal, been discarded, been told they hold no worth, remember Sarah. Remember that those who throw you away often carry secrets they pray you'll never find. Remember that patience, careful records, and quiet strategy can transform cruelty into your greatest weapon. Thank you for staying through Sarah's extraordinary journey, from betrayal to something far greater than revenge. Share this story with someone who needs reminding. Being knocked down is not defeat. Sometimes it means you found the hidden vault.